All right, well, it's 5 after. With silence, I will take it that everyone is ready. Are we recording?
Yes, I'm. Bits asked me to record since he's gonna be a little late.
All right, fantastic. So, like I said, I probably have missed a ton of highlights. So, if you have anything, please raise your hand and like throw it out there, or add it to the doc, and I'll take it. I just did not have my usual time to prep this morning. But there were a few things that I got in the last 5 minutes or so. So one thing I wanted to highlight was the locality cache on executors for delete files. This is Anton's recent work to, again, make delete files a whole lot more efficient when we are reading in Spark. Basically what it's going to do is determine where, well, it's going to fake locality based on delete files in Spark and be able to essentially schedule tasks on nodes so that the delete file cache gets a whole bunch of cache hits, which should be a really good thing for applying delete files. This is in addition to work that goes and actually runs that cache and sort of does a multi-threaded read and things like that to fix the overall efficiency of delete files, which has been a big help. So I would expect in the 1.5 release for Spark deletes to run a whole lot faster. Sorry, Spark reads with delete files to run a whole lot faster, which is a really nice area. Also, on that same note, there are some good PRs out in the Trino and Presto communities from Upsolver. So Upsolver has been looking at this area and is applying equality deletes in different ways in the Trino and Presto engines. They have slightly different implementations because the projects have diverged enough at this point. But basically using an anti-join in Presto and something similar to Spark with caching and essentially like only reading delete files a single time in Trino. And they've seen substantial performance improvements through both approaches. So hopefully those are going in soon for the releases in those communities. I think, Jack, you'll probably want to check out those if you haven't already as well, because it seems like at least one of them would be applicable to Athena. Next thing I want to highlight is the new docs build. So thanks to Bits for his work over the past couple months. We are now live on the new docs site. We're still cleaning up a lot of things. So things like the ASF links were dropped in the transition because we created an ASF page rather than something where we had like a footer or a drop-down menu. We're working through those issues. I would encourage everyone to please go fix docs if you notice there's anything that is out of whack. The new docs are very easy to edit, and we're at a point where I think feedback and iteration there is really welcome. So the evergreen documentation, like the spec and things like that, live in the site folder of the main Iceberg repository or the reference implementations repository, and the version specific docs live in the docs folder of the Iceberg repository. So it should be very easy to find those. Please go and check it out, make edits, improve things. It's great to have all of that in one place and hopefully a whole lot easier to edit. Next highlight, we've added more documentation on sharing and credentials through the REST API. So now it not only covers S3, but also the GCP and Azure credential sharing. And this is vended credentials. So the way table sharing works in the Iceberg world is rather than having a separate API, you can present an identity to a REST endpoint, and it can send you the metadata for a table along with a set of credentials or vended credentials that you can use to talk to the underlying object store. This already works great in both Iceberg Python as well as the reference implementation. I imagine the Rust implementation will have this support as well. But it's a super easy way to get to read tables with just credentials to talk to the REST catalog, because that REST catalog can provide you the credentials for the next layer. Next, I want to again thank Anton. I saw that support for rewriting delete manifests went into Spark 3.5 and Spark 3.4. And then Amogh has been pushing for a while to fix aggregate pushdown on nested fields in Spark. So that's a bug that is really nice to get out there. That aggregate pushdown is really nice. There's also a PR out there that we should review for aggregate pushdown based on partition values. So you'd be able to slice a data set by, say, day or something, as long as it's partitioned by that, to get those aggregations. So that's pretty exciting. All right. Any other highlights that I have missed? I know there's probably a ton going on in the Rust community and the Iceberg communities.
Do you want to hand it over to Paco to do one on the Python?
Yeah, Paco, do you want to mention?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, so exciting times for the Python release. We have the 0.6 coming. There's write support, also commit path for SQL, Hive, JDBC, tons of other stuff. Also a lot of activity already on the repository, on the GitHub for the next release. So thank you all for giving it a try. At this point, we're at release candidate 6. We iterated quite fast on it. Thank you for all the feedback there. So please make sure to give it a try to see if you find any issues, and otherwise you can continue with the release. Also on the Rust side, we're starting to do the first release of 0.2, which will be very basic, but just good to get it out to the community and see if we can get more people also involved into the project. It will mainly be around table inspection. The catalog support for the REST implementation will be in there, so that's very exciting. And yeah, so we're working on that just to make sure that we get the first RC out this week. I think
Awesome.
That's my side.
Thank you. Really awesome to see 3 releases going on all at the same time. That's pretty neat. All right, let's move on to releases. So I'll hand it over to Ajantha for Iceberg 1.5.
Yeah, we are actually waiting on the JDBC view, and as well as one more PR related to the SQL view representation. I just shared the milestone there. I think the JDBC view PR is closed now. I mean, it is ready for the review, and we can take it forward. Once it is done, I can start the preparing the RC cut for the same.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, we're on some of the last rounds of reviews, hopefully for the JDBC catalog. So that'll be really good to get view support into that catalog. And I guess that's another thing to highlight is all of the work that's gone around create or replace view in Spark. All of that has also gone in. So thanks to Edward there. I think the only remaining thing is that we are making sure that dialects don't get dropped when replacing a view. So because certain engines are going to be strict about views, the create or replace view, if you run it in Trino and then run it in Spark, Spark's going to drop the Trino dialect. And we want to make sure that that doesn't happen, because that would essentially break the view for other people. So those are the 2 things left. Thank you, Ajantha. Hopefully we'll get those reviews done very soon and get on top of it. All right. PyIceberg 0.6. The RC is out, like Fako said, so please go and vote on that. I don't think there's anything else to note there, unless do we still need to roll another RC because of the license stuff?
No, that has been fixed.
Okay.
So that's part in RC6, and we also found like one issue that was reported on Slack about passing configuration to environment variables that also has been fixed in the latest RC.
Okay, awesome. Who wants to talk about the Rust release? We don't have to have
as well, but I also see Jan in here, so I don't want to take his spot there. Yeah, so what I said, like it's a first release, so we got the docs out, yeah, just to see like if you can yeah, get it out and see if we can get more people joining it. There's a lot of activity, a lot of cool stuff there. So yeah, I'm very excited about it. I think it will enable a lot of Rust-based compute engine that we have nowadays to also leverage Iceberg there.
Awesome, thank you. And let's move on to discussion topics. I want to give a quick update on Iceberg Summit. I tried to move some of the easier or faster things to the start. So Iceberg Summit, we have the PMC has chosen a group of people to be the selection committee. So thank you to everyone who has volunteered for that. JB and I are working on updating the proposal. The next step is a proposal to be able to use the Apache Iceberg trademark and brand for the Iceberg Summit. And part of that is also locking down dates with respect to the event policy. So we have a question out to figure out dates, and we're going to get that proposal hopefully to the community probably sometime this week. Then once the community and the trademark committee sign off on it, we'll get all those things prepared. And I'll also be sending out a notice or notification for everyone who's on the selection committee to sort of set up that that mailing list and get us rolling there. So that is happening. We're aiming for sometime in late May. That date might change a little bit based on conflicts with or a potential conflict with community over code in Europe, which is about 2 weeks away from our intended date today, right now. All right, that's it on Iceberg Summit. Let's talk about nanoseconds. I think that has been reviewed, and we need to get another. Is it ready for another round of review? What are the next steps there?
Hi, this is Eric. It's not ready for another round of review, but I will have your comments addressed today, and I will let you know. I was out on vacation the last couple of days and at an engineering summit with the company last week, but it'll be taken care of today.
Cool. I think that's by JB. I think that's a really good next step. So nanosecond timestamps and additional types are part of the V3 spec that we're working towards, along with the work on multi-column transforms and default values. So really good to have this one rolling along. Sorry that nanoseconds are probably going to have the most churn and review, because we actually need to figure out how we're introducing new types in a way that is backward compatible, but also allows you, we introduced the requirement for types at V3. So you must support nanosecond types in V3. However, we also want to make it so that you can opt in to use those types in V2 tables. So we need to figure out exactly how that works. And that is also basically the exact same thing that we want to do for the multi-column transforms, where you can opt in and say, yes, I know that certain readers or writers won't be able to interact with these types. So thanks for taking that on, you guys. All right. Next up, we have a draft of the materialized view spec, which I think is a good time to start looking at this again, since we just got views in and they'll be released in 1.5. So Jan, is that?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Hi all. Yeah, I thought this would be a good time to talk about it, since I posted it on the mailing list like some time ago actually. But since then there has been quite some intense discussion about the spec generally. But we kind of, or at least the people that were looking into it, we kind of decided on a draft lately. And since I don't really know how the whole procedure works, I just thought it would be a good time to let you know, have a look and ask what might be the next step to get this along. And I don't know how much time we have here, if I should talk a little bit more about it. And well, actually, I would like to thank everybody who contributed in the doc. It was like really helpful input from everybody. So
go ahead.
In the end, I think the materialized view spec can be seen as an extension to the view spec, but in order for that to work, like we would need to add some additional fields to the view spec, but then also to the snapshot spec for the table. So this is kind of the current design. I don't know, like if if still people want to make some comment, like have another look at it and have some more comments. I mean, it actually took us quite some time to agree on the stuff that we just decided for now, but I still always had the feeling that obviously there's some feedback from key stakeholders missing maybe, so I don't know.
That sounds like a reasonable next step to me. Have more people go take a look at it and read through it. It looks like it's changed considerably since I think I last took a look at it, but whoa, there's a ton of discussion on it too. I think let's have people read through the spec and maybe discuss in more detail at the next one of these.
Yes, well, and keep in mind that I think it doesn't show like, so I tried to, like, most of the like actual decisions we had to take, I kind of appended them as questions to the end of the document. If you go to, like, if you scroll to the end, you kind of have design decisions where we try to kind of line out all the pros and cons about the different topics, and then you can see more probably on the right the discussions, like people having arguments for both sides, and then I like currently highlighted kind of the favorites of the people who were kind of in the discussion. So maybe if you take a look, I know it's a daunting task at this time because there have been a lot of comments, but maybe also have a look at least a little bit into the discussion, because otherwise we might repeat all the discussions again. And yeah.
Okay, that sounds great. I think the advantage as well of having people look over the spec and then come in and discuss in a forum like this is we can kind of summarize some of those discussions and just like bring up specific points to decide on. Dan?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that there's possibly some things we want to include in that in terms of how we want to do the integration into Spark and potentially Trino. Like Trino actually has some concept for materialized views. Spark, on the other hand, like we did a lot of work to add all the DDL and other things for the just the view implementation. And I don't believe there's been work on like a materialized view catalog or a view catalog that supports materialized views in Spark. So there's probably a little bit of work to figure out how do we intend to actually expose this in Spark as well, beyond just the spec.
I think the spec is a really good place to start. I mean, I agree, we'll need DDL statements and things like that. And it helps to think through, like, how would this fit into those things? But since Spark is, you know, a blank slate at this point, I think it probably makes more sense to start with the Trino perspective and try and see how it would fit into Trino, rather than trying to plan Spark and Trino at the same, or sorry, plan Spark integration and the spec at the same time.
Yeah, I think making sure that we don't introduce something that would be incompatible or difficult to work with in Trino is a good starting point. On the Spark side, yeah, I think it just comes down to, like, how much specialization are we going to have to do on top of even what is going to be going into view catalog implementation going forward. Just an understanding of that may help drive, you know, the effort. So it's worth knowing where you're going.
Yeah. So anyone interested, please take a look at the spec, and we'll have this on the discussion for next time for, like, deeper dive. All right. Thanks. The next topic is one I wanted to bring up, and this is the supported catalogs. So people have suggested to me recently, and I don't want to call anyone out specifically, that Iceberg is quite confusing when it comes to catalog support and what catalogs we want to use. So the history here is that we originally introduced a very simple API for plugging in catalogs. This was originally just table operations, where you could swap a metadata location or get a metadata location. It grew somewhat to incorporate the catalog API that we have today, where you can identify tables by name and load them and things like that. But it was always an area where you could plug in your own. And that was because we had so many people doing different things here. Large companies that used the Hive Metastore or Glue or Metacat at Netflix, or their own, you know, Frankenstein system. And now we have a lot of different implementations, and there are a lot of implementations out there. We've added the REST spec. We have DynamoDB, JDBC. There's one for just using Hadoop in a file system, which is a terrible idea. There's a Glue one, a Hive one. Did I say JDBC? Anyway, oh, there's also there's a Snowflake one. So there are too many catalogs at this point, I think. And we're seeing this problem now where catalogs need different levels of support. So, you know, we're working hard to get the JDBC catalog upgraded to support views. The Hive catalog still does not. Then we have problems with those things. So JDBC doesn't work with all JDBC backends. We also, like, people are confused about what they should be using. We've hit Hive table locking and multiple implementations across both languages and frameworks. So Trino has their own catalog implementations for JDBC, Hive, and REST. Actually, REST does go through the REST catalog implementation. But we have different implementations as well in Python, and we almost did a Python release without locking support. And so this is becoming, I think, an operational burden where we typically don't want the project to, you know, need to do a lot of work to support, you know, version upgrades across JDBC tables and catalogs and things like that. So I want to propose that we drop or simplify this space in preparation for a 2.0 release. I think that if the community is truly heading towards a REST catalog where you put whatever you want to behind that REST catalog API, that makes sense to start standardizing and removing some of the catalog implementations that we have currently that are going to be difficult to use. This is not an easy thing because it involves removing code, but it also is we need to get out of the business, I think, of supporting everything under the sun in the reference implementation itself. So just want to throw that out there. Is there support for reducing the number of catalogs? What catalogs do we want to roll forward with in V2? And simplify this space to help people make good decisions here. Yeah.
So I just want to throw one more thing on the top of that, which is we've also introduced a series of kind of like vendor or ecosystem specific catalogs, because there's one for Dell, I want to say ECS or ECR.
Yeah.
There's also the Snowflake catalog, and I don't think that the BigQuery catalog went in, but it's been in review for a long time, and it's kind of like, what do we want to do with external connectivity type things? Do they move to a separate project? Do we do a similar thing and say, hey, we want to consolidate even those implementations? It's an open question. I don't have an idea of where we want to go with those ones, but they're somewhat distinctly different than the ones that are just early implementations that really haven't garnered a lot of support, like maybe the Dynamo catalog or the Hadoop catalog, which was never really intended to be production, but people are kind of using it that way because it's easy to set up, but then problematic down the line.
I'd love to get rid of the Hadoop catalog and deprecate that in V3.
Russell?
Hey, I think everyone knows I'm also not a big fan of the Hadoop catalog. I just know that we have folks who have a lot of production use cases on Hadoop, more than I ever thought was possible. And that's one of the reasons that we're working on the Hadoop operations logging fix now, is that people are using it, unfortunately. That said, I am happy with a REST-only future, but only if we also have a REST implementation somewhere that's being supported. I feel like we're getting to that point where if we're going to say you can't use all these other things, you should at least say we have a full package that you can use Iceberg with. I don't like it where we only say we're going to support the format version, and that means to actually start, you then have to still make another choice before you do it.
So I would almost say that sounds reasonable to me. In that, I've never wanted to support a runtime thing, right? Because inevitably you choose the wrong HTML framework or the wrong, servlet or thing, or you need to produce metrics to open metrics and open telemetry and all of the above, right? You end up spending so much time integrating with whatever runtime a given company uses that it's not really worth it. That said, maybe a separate project Iceberg catalog that could take on those things and have a fixed backend that is a JDBC backend that can actually have a Java version of SQL Alchemy. I'm not sure what whatever that is, but have something there that can do that translation to support multiple JDBC backends and actually do something here would make sense. And it would at least clarify the space so that this is the way you run an Iceberg metastore, rather than having so many different options today. I worry about going directly to a JDBC catalog from hundreds of driver processes in a big Spark cluster and things like that. We probably need to clean up this space, and I'd trade the catalog runtime for the mess that we have now. I think
I'm okay with that trade. I'm sorry, Daniel.
Yeah. So I think I reluctantly agree with that to some extent. I think we kind of need to scope what we would want that catalog to really look like, because we've already created 8 catalogs that aren't great, and so if we go down the path of actually supporting something that's fully runtime, we probably want to really be clear about what the scope of it is, what kind of stack we're using and technologies, because that's where things get really complicated. You know, there are other implementations out there, and they're a mess of stacks that then people aren't happy about because we made very opinionated choices about, oh, we're going to use this framework or some other. If we can keep it light, if we can keep it really focused in terms of like what we actually needed to do, like Ryan was saying, a JDBC backend, we probably need a little more complexity in order to like support multiple databases. We're already having problems with that with the JDBC catalog and the different flavors of syntax and, you know, what kind of statements you can actually use in transitioning between versions. I know the history of like Hive Metastore, and I don't want to repeat that same kind of thing.
I think that's inevitable, though. Like that's my main concern here is like, is it possible to not repeat a Hive Metastore type project? I mean, I think keeping definitely responsibilities on that REST catalog endpoint as light as possible is going to be a good thing. And maybe we use the current thing where you can plug your own, you know, catalog jar into it, and we've just maintained that separation. But like, I think if you get into multiple SQL dialects and those things, it's gonna turn into that. Jack, next.
Yeah, actually, this is a good topic because I think we touched about that in a previous database discussion, that some other project had a kind of a REST catalog implementation. And I was saying that we probably want some kind of implementation of REST in Iceberg, not because we want people to use that for production, because exactly we want to avoid a Hive Metastore kind of project. But at least people should be able to like start running this locally for testing purpose to speed up development. And I think it's important that we set up that expectation for the development of such a thing. That, for example, it's not going to be backwards compatible. It's just for testing purpose, etc. And if we have those expectations, I think it will be more smooth and avoid those kind of things. Maybe.
I don't know if we're gonna be able to do that. Like, I would love to say, you know, we don't have one of these for production uses. You should build your own. But I really think we're gonna have to make some hard choices here and probably support something that runs as a production catalog. Now, I think that we can be smart about that. We could, first of all, take all the catalog implementations and move them to this Iceberg catalog project, so that you can run, you know, your Iceberg catalog very easily your REST catalog with a JDBC or a Postgres or a Hive backend very easily. I think that would be a very good step. Like, just put everything behind REST through this project, and then also try and make it as easy as possible to run like a container that just has this thing, right? Because really it's going to be a load balancer to a set of catalog containers. And if we provide a catalog container with some HTTP system in it, it's going to be fine. I think, you know, like try and keep it well scoped and just use that as a way to get Iceberg proper away from catalog implementations.
Bits, I'm going to jump ahead of you really quick because I have to drop. But I would just say I think we need to define the scope of that initially, just because it's going to be real appealing for people to try and like throw everything into this and make it a kitchen sink, where it's like, oh, we want to add data governance and we want to add open lineage and like all these other things. And we don't want to just like use that as an opportunity to collect a lot of extraneous things that then become complicated and hard to maintain. So I think clearly defining that, like, we still want to support Hive for people who are migrating at some level, right? You know, we want to have a good implementation so that they can continue to use their Metastore until they can move over and, you know, get familiar with like REST interface and running that in some sort of production. I'm a little skeptical that we could put something out that people wouldn't use in production. So we want a solution that can scale to some extent, but no guarantees that it's infinitely scalable and it's going to work for every kind of operational use case. But in general, I think it's almost necessary that we do something here.
Yeah, and speaking of the two catalogs in AWS right now, I think we had the Dynamo catalog for some customer requests, but I don't know if they're actually using that. I think they forked that and they just had their own implementation. So we can start a thread to just deprecate that, maybe. And for the glue catalog, we can discuss if we can move to some AWS GitHub domain or something like that. I don't know what's the best way people think.
Well, so
I like the
go ahead.
so I like the like Apache Iceberg catalog project idea. Like it's just like a sub project. We put all of the catalogs in there, and then it's a test dependency of the icebergs for implementation project.
Yeah, I like that too. Then, basically we can keep that constantly up to date. Like that means we could have a catalog implementation per like JDBC backend maybe, or we could it gives us a lot more flexibility to maintain stuff. I think we still want to deprecate as many backends, like actual storage platforms, as possible. Like if we can get rid of Dynamo because no one's using it, that would be awesome. But we're not going to be able to remove, say, Nessie, right? But being able to say you should connect to Nessie through this catalog proxy. Really, that's the thing that we're talking about building, is putting all those catalog implementations inside a project that uses the REST protocol and then proxies to the catalog as a service. So I think that's a good step forward for us, and we can then get everyone focused on REST implementations, and hopefully that project becomes less and less of a necessity over time. All right, Bits?
Yeah, can y'all hear me?
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. So I was just thinking, like, one of my kitchen sink items, doesn't have to be V1 obviously, but like, I think having this be something that I see this as a very valuable thing from like a educational perspective, seeing it from the dev advocate view, and having it be something that could be run like locally would be a really nice to have. I know that we have a lot of other pieces that we're thinking about, but having a local REST catalog that could effectively be kind of prodded and probed through the REST API to kind of like teach people about Iceberg, it would be incredibly valuable. But again, on that list, it's just something that I'd like to be kind of like help out in designing, and if that's something that we think would be of value.
I'm a lot more skeptical of it for educational value, because I think people want very, very simple dev environments or learning environments, and setting up a container, requiring Docker and setting up a container, like there are just a lot of folks that are not going to be satisfied by that.
This would require yeah, that was my guess, is like, is there would there be a way to basically have this also have a Docker setup, but then like have a almost fat jar if we're going to do it, from a Java standpoint. Maybe that's not the best design implementation, but thinking about it through some sort of executable way.
So I mean, to me, there are a couple different. I would say we take all of the catalog code we currently have.
Yeah,
stick
do that first.
Project. We have the catalog handlers either copied or implemented over there that can translate to the older catalog API, to the catalog API in Java. We also then need a servlet implementation like the one that Tabular hosts. Mm-hmm. And that would probably be the core project. Where yes, you can then wrap this servlet in whatever you want to, like actually do the HTTP or I actually am not very familiar with how all that stuff plugs together, but like have a reasonable thing that you can run through code, right? And
Okay.
hopefully plug in wherever you choose. Then we would probably also have a Docker container or something where it's easy to actually run this, and maybe like a Helm chart or whatever to go run this in Kubernetes and set up load balancing and stuff.
Okay.
I think that would be up to the community that forms around that project in the end.
Okay.
We would probably want to bootstrap it with something simple, make it production grade, and then try and grow that as a separate project.
Okay. Sounds good.
So if there's broad agreement there, I'll start a thread on the dev list about starting an Iceberg catalog project and moving things over there. All right, sounds great. Next topic on the list is Flink table maintenance. Anyone want to take that one on? Thank you, Jack.
Yeah, I think probably Peter will add that one. I don't think he's in the call, so.
Okay.
I don't
cool.
want to misspoken, but on his behalf, yeah, I think probably better for him to speak.
It looks like there's Flink table maintenance starting up. So yeah, I guess, please pay attention to that, and maybe next time we can sync up with Peter on that topic.
Yeah, let me ping him. He's on right now. I was actually just talking with him.
All right, let's skip ahead and we can come back to it if he joins. Pagination and table planning APIs. So these are, I think, where we have broad agreement on updating the REST spec for pagination, basically being able to supply pagination parameters in the URI to say like, hey, start at this point, and then where that's an opaque token, and then give me some number of results. So that is rolling. Please take a look at that. Jack, do you want to cover the consensus point that you have here?
Actually, I was wondering if I could.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's all good. Yeah. Hey, everyone. My name is Rahel. I also work alongside Jack in the AWS Athena team. So, like Ryan was saying, we are introducing a new change to the spec for pagination, essentially adding 2 new parameters. One, which is this opaque token, which will be sending to services that support pagination, letting them know to honor this protocol. And then we'll be adding also a page size, which essentially will be an upward bound for results that services that support pagination can return. Obviously, if it's the last page, then a client may receive fewer results. And then for the response, clients that are doing this protocol will be getting a next page token. So if it's present, this indicates to the client that there are more results to be attained. And if the client does not receive this, this indicates that there are no more results. So I think we have consensus, but the initial sending of this opaque page token, we talked about this being empty. And I think there's 3 approaches that is what Jack also put on the PR of considering this empty value, which is either approach 1 is that we send no value at all. So something like page token question mark page size equals some number. Approach 2, which is like page token equals, I guess, the equivalent of like an empty string. And then the third being page token equals, I think %02, which I'm not really like a REST expert, but I think this indicates the start of a test ASCII character. So I think Jack was mentioning that we should go ahead with approach 3 because this seems to be less ambiguous. And for me, at least, I was thinking that approach 1 or 2, which is either setting nothing or setting an empty string, seems to be more in line with an empty value. So wanted to just get others' thoughts on this.
Well, my take is I think %02 is probably my least favorite because that's a value that everyone has to look up, and like there's no intuitive like understanding of what you're doing there. I think we want to keep these APIs to where like you can kind of understand what it would be. So that is definitely my least favorite option. Of the other two, I would say we should probably support both. Right? Either an empty string or not present means, you know, the starting value, and that just depends on how people want to. You know, that gives people flexibility, so you don't need that extra if statement in your code, like, hey, if we're starting, then leave it out, or you know, it depends on how you want to do it. But I think it's the most friendly option is both of the first two. Jack, you want to disagree
I
with
think this is kind of we want the people who has more experience with actually interacting with the REST service here, because like I was just mainly browsing through Stack Overflows, and some people are saying that the first two options are not supported across all the frameworks. That's kind of why this discussion came up in the first place.
So what frameworks is this like?
Like parsing different structures of the query parameters.
I mean, I've definitely seen empty query parameters before. I mean, yeah, I'll definitely take a look. That's my early take without having read any of this. So let's continue discussion over there. But yeah, my early take is definitely that. I don't know if there's anyone else who wants to speak up here. Cool.
Just one thing. So I'm still trying to understand, why do we have to support 1 and 2? Like, wouldn't it be awkward for clients to just send an empty string, and it's just better to support 1? Or
so I think we can encourage one or the other, but with an API, I think the rule is liberal with what you accept and strict with what you produce. And this strikes me as an opportunity to be liberal with what you accept, which is like, hey, if this is empty or non-existent, treat it as the start. Okay. Next, looks like we need consensus around serializing partition tuples in the REST spec as well.
yeah, I can also just briefly talk about this, and then Jack or Drew, who also was the one who made the change, which I rebase on for this content file change. So basically, I think in the original proposal for the REST scan task, one of the new models that we're adding is content file, which is largely based off of the content file parser. So I think in the proposal, I believe Ryan left a comment that we want to model this partition value better, because I think we had it as a string. So essentially, when I was looking at the, I think, content file Java interface, it seems to be a struct-like. So, Drew was able to make the actual changes in the spec, essentially adding 3 type values. So, like, we'll now have partition value as a partition as a struct type value, which has a reference to a type value that can also be a struct type value, a map type value, and a primitive type value. Because inside the content file parser, it seems like for partition, it kind of follows this recursive logic. Essentially, it ends up calling a single value parser, and then that has all the primitive types. So I think we wanted to get a little bit more consensus, specifically on the single values, if we should be adding a timestamp type value or a decimal type value for each single primitive type. Yeah, I don't know if that was, Jack, kind of close to what you wanted as well, or.
Yeah, for example, we like just take, for example, timestamp and decimal are all parsed, serialized as strings. So do we express that just as string in the OpenAPI spec, or do we essentially have different definitions of all those, although they are all strings? seems like that was kind of what people are debating.
So I think we want to probably stick with the JSON serialization of values that we've come up with. Now, the easiest way to call that and things like that, I don't know, but like I wouldn't, yeah, I would probably incorporate that other like spec here because we've done a good job of figuring out how to take a value of every type and serialize it to JSON and back. And that was for the default value work, you know, because you need to be able to serialize values of a certain type. Luckily, I think this should be actually simpler than structs and maps and lists and things. Like we can just come up with a representation for how we want this tuple to look, and then each individual value in the tuple would be that, you know, a single value, and so we only need to pay attention to primitive types and things like that. But yeah, I don't know that we're going to get consensus on that here. It's probably something to take care of in reviews.
Yeah, it's already just calling out for review.
Sounds great.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, and then in our last 4 minutes, we have one more on the REST spec, which is permissions and I think this is policy decisions in the REST spec, right?
Yeah, this is one I added. I kind of raised this thread before the this meeting in the dev list as well. So basically kind of related to the credential stuffs that was clarified in the REST spec. I think people seems to want more construct about permissions in the REST spec, and I like to know what's the interest in the community about adding those constructs. And just an example of what we are thinking is in the load table response, in addition to returning like the credentials, we also return, for example, this caller who is requesting loading table can only do read, and maybe reading a certain set of columns with some row level filters, these kind of things.
Yeah, thanks for raising this, Jack. I read it yesterday and wanted to reply to it, but didn't get to it. But nice that you bring it up right now. My biggest question is like, how are we going to enforce this? Like, I think like giving the policy is nice, right? You know upfront like what your permission is on the table, but more like on the column projection, but also on the row filtering. It seems to me something that has to be done by the query engine, and yeah, not really on the table level, I would say. Right?
I think
really enforce it.
I think that's the idea, is that if you have something that has to be enforced by the query engine, we want a way for the catalog to express that and say, hey, you can read this table, but you can only read inside this space, or you can only read these columns, and it's up to a trusted engine to apply those constraints.
Yeah, because for the typical setup of like a data platform and the end user, it's usually the data platform is controlling the engines and having the end user identity passed in, and they can react accordingly then to those identity and related policy and respect that in the engine.
Yeah, I can see that for the columns, but for row level, I think we, yeah, in the end, like if it's mixed inside of the same Parquet file, then it's like a trust thing then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. That was my only question.
Yeah. And I think my big question here is on what the proposal is for like semantics around that that row filter, but we are at time, so that'll probably have to take place on the dev list. So thanks everyone for coming. Great discussion today. Glad to get some of that catalog stuff out of the way, and we'll look forward to seeing you all next time.